Great to see everyone. Thanks for joining so promptly. Yes, tonight we're going to be talking about all things AI in the workplace. Are we looking forward to a future of an unbridled creative cornucopia, or are we all doomed? Let's find out. Yes, we've got an amazing panel that are going to be talking this evening. Before we do, yes, on behalf of Sarah and myself, welcome. And of course, we're joined as ever on the line by the other two members of our small but mighty team, Yiman and Michelle. So before I bring the panel on, I'm just going to say a few obligatory opening remarks about our work here at Angel Academy. Now, I'm sure most of you don't need me to tell you this, but just a reminder that Angel Academy was established by Sarah and myself a little over a decade ago to address the staggeringly low amount of funding going to female-founded technology businesses. And we've been doing that, largely addressing that, by increasing the numbers of women that are investing as angels. Yes, so as I said, we've been doing this for just over a decade, and many of our members have invested in multiple deals through multiple rounds over that decade. We're listed by Bowhurst as one of the UK's most active angel networks. And indeed, we are the only female-focused angel network in their listing. Of course, our primary focus is on addressing the gender imbalance in funding. But it's worth saying that many of the startups that we have funded address many of the other UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have a host of other angel groups that we're delighted to co-invest alongside, and we'll be speaking about one of those later. Yes, the another obligatory thing in these presentations, an obligatory award slide. But in all seriousness, we were delighted last year to win Angel Team of the Year at the Growth Investor Awards. So now Sarah has another piece of plastic to put on her shelf, which will need the occasional dusting. Some tasty numbers for you. You'll be delighted to hear. I'm not going to read through all of these, but the most salient for me is that we have recently closed another investment, taking our portfolio now to 54 companies who have between them created over 1,000 very high quality jobs. And here are some of the amazing women founders in whom we've invested over that last decade. If you'd like to know more about any of these founders and their companies, please visit the portfolio page on the Angel Academy website. But a little bit of news that it would be remiss of me not to mention, and I'm sure some of you have heard this already, but we are delighted that Syndicate Room have announced that their next partner fund will be the Angel Academy EIS Fund. There's lots of detail to delve into on that, and with that in mind, we are going to be holding a webinar to launch the fund next week. I'll be talking about that webinar in my wrap-up chat at the end of this call. But finally, a big shout out to some of our many friends out there. We are, of course, delighted to have Kingsley Napley and DC Advisory as our sponsors. We've got great professional advisors in accounting and talent from Broadlawn and Akana. We got a whole bunch of investment partners, as I've mentioned, and we've got a lot of mission-aligned partners as well, including Women in Telecoms and Technology. So that's me done. I'm going to take this down and I'm going to invite to the stage. Are you there, guys? Kayleigh, Lana, Gillian, and Chris.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Actually, I've changed screens and now I can't see you, but hopefully you can see each other.
Yes, we can.
So I'm going to hand over to Chris, in whose capable hands we'll be having a great conversation over the next best part of an hour or so. So Chris, I think it's over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar about investing in AI in 2025, a discussion on the investing landscape. If all goes to plan, we're going to have a particular focus on AI and the future of work. We'll be diving into how AI is reshaping the workplace, some of the opportunities and risks which are associated with that, and what that means from an investment perspective. So I'm Perrin, and I'll be chairing today's discussions. I'm joined by three brilliant AI specialists, both from an investor and a founder perspective. But before I hand over to them to introduce themselves, I'll just tell you very quickly a bit about me. I'm a lawyer and a partner at Kingsley Napley, which is a top 100 full-service central London-based law firm. We're ideally located on the edge of Shoreditch, just a short walk away from Silicon Roundabout. So London's own answer to Silicon Valley, albeit on a slightly smaller scale, which puts us nice and close to so many of our technology clients. I sit within the firm's corporate, commercial and finance team and lead on all things commercial, technology, outsourcing and data related, which includes AI. My team and I, we work with businesses of all different shapes and sizes, from startups to blue chips, although it's fair to say that our sweet spot is working with technology scale-up businesses and very aligned with the sorts of businesses who are in the Angel Academy network. Quite a few of our clients are in the business of AI, operating in the UK, the EU and beyond, each of which presents its own opportunities and challenges, which is one of the reasons why I've been asked to chair today's panel discussion. That's enough about me. Without further ado, I'll pass over the baton to my panel to introduce themselves. Just because I can see you first, Kayleigh, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Kayleigh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Deployed. My background is in strategy consulting and advisory. So AI, machine learning, tech trends have followed me around and have been a large interest of mine for the better part of my career. And 6 years ago, I co-founded Deployed, which is an AI startup very much focused on helping business teams and large corporates to work better with their corporate functions, so HR, procurement, legal specifically. And our platform and our solutions support these business users in writing better inputs, especially creation of documents, requirements, contracts, also sourcing and hiring decision making, anything that a business user needs to create that then ends up in some of these corporate functions. And we support them and use AI to improve the quality of these inputs to make sure that timelines are met, outcomes are met, and values generated. I'm very happy to be here today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kayleigh. And Lana, you're next on my screen.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lana Korzhuk. I've been in IT for more than 20 years, specifically in software development, developing ERP system for fresh produce industry. I was a co-owner of the company for 20 years, starting as a developer, progressing to CTOs and COO. My interest in AI started when I was doing my degree in IT, again 20 years ago, but I didn't do anything with it until 2021. Since then, I concentrated on learning more on classical AI, it's machine learning and deep learning. And since Gen AI came out, it's became my new added interest. Happy to be here.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lana. And last but not least, Gillian.
Hi. Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here. My name is Gillian McColgan. I have roughly 30 years of work behind me in high tech, engineer by training, and CTO for probably the last 15, 16 years of that work life. Equally split between Europe and North America, and again, equally split between Fortune 100 and later on in my career, 2 startups, both successfully. At this point, I've taken a step back from work life, and I spent my time angel investing and mentoring, particularly women, and particularly investing in women-focused businesses. So, and I, like Lana, have a long history with what came in artificial intelligence from the beginning of machine learning right through to generative AI and various other forms of artificial intelligence.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gillian. So before we get into the detail, perhaps it's worth just clarifying some terms really quickly. As throwing things around like AI and Gen AI and machine learning without understanding them can be a bit tricky. It's a bit like ordering from a menu in a foreign language. You might end up with something you don't really want. So AI, or artificial intelligence to give it its full name, is an all-inclusive term which refers to the use of data and algorithms, which are essentially information and rules to allow computers to learn, act, and perform functions which are normally associated with human intelligence. Whereas generative AI, or Gen AI for short, that refers to a subset of AI that uses programs to process large data sets and detect patterns, then create new works of text, imagery, video, and even computer code based on the instructions that it's given. Think of it as a bit like your creative assistant. But there are some catches, notably that it sometimes confidently presents incorrect information. And you may have heard the term hallucinations, and we'll talk about that a bit later. So think of Gen AI as your brilliant creative director who occasionally mixes up facts, but produces some compelling work. And then machine learning, on the other hand, it's a different branch of AI to Gen AI, which learns and improves based on the data it consumes. And that can be done in either a supervised or an unsupervised way. But at its most basic level, algorithms learn from data to make predictions or decisions. So think of it a bit like a seasoned business analyst who can do things like forecast sales and demand and predict late payments. Finally, there's also deep learning, which is essentially a specialized subset of machine learning, so making it more powerful and capable of handling complex tasks like image and speech recognition. And that's excellent for unstructured data and complex tasks. It's fast to deploy and predict and handles nuances better. So think of that as your detail-orientated quality inspector who can spot the difference between a minor product defect and a normal variation. So now that I've got some of the jargon out of the way, let's kick things off by asking our panelists to tell us as succinctly as possible what excites or worries you most about AI and the future of work. Who'd like to go first?
I'm happy to go first. What excites me the most about AI, specifically in the future of work, when I talk about future of work, I mean large corporates and what AI can do for them and the people that work there. And I'm most excited about the potential to transform how these large corporates create and communicate structured knowledge. For example, in procurement, AI can turn vague business needs into clear, actionable inputs. Statements of work or supply briefs, scope descriptions are usually written with a lot of back and forth, and AI can do a lot there to improve quality, increase value, and shorten the time that's required to create these inputs. And what I'm most worried about is the risk of AI being used to reinforce bureaucracy in a way rather than reduce it. Because if we just bolt on AI onto outdated processes, don't customize it in the right way or feed it the right information, then you'll end up with faster red tape rather than smarter work or the automation that you're after. And that's a real danger, I believe, because we've got to rethink these workflows and these flows of communication of knowledge between teams, and especially those where collaboration is everything. And yeah, that's, to me, is the biggest risk or the biggest worry, or something I have seen at clients already as well.
Brilliant. Who'd like to go next?
I can. And thank you, Kayleigh, because you put perspective I didn't think about. But what excites me most about AI, especially Gen AI, it's availability of knowledge for small businesses, because normally small businesses struggle to attract talent and have in-house knowledge to actually compete with big corporation. And this was going on for years, where now it is possible to bring this knowledge in-house with a lower cost. Yes, it will not replace human, but at least it will give access to information at much lower cost than it was before. So this is an exciting part. I think it will give a lot of more stability and security for small businesses if they use it correctly. I always want to put if in my statements. And what worries me the most is that companies will be misplaced or displacing human workforce very quickly and taking out human from the loop and relying completely on AI, because they remove creativity and they remove a future expertise from workforce. So I do worry about prioritizing profit, quick profit over long-term complications of doing that.
And I'll follow up on that. So Lana and Kayleigh made some interesting points, so I'm not going to repeat what they've covered, but I do think that AI within the future of work is really a delicate balance between progress and inequality. What excites me about it is potential to automate a lot of what frankly mundane routine tasks that are either hard to recruit people for or are cost generative within the business, and it should allow people to be freed up for more productive use of their time, which is around higher level problem solving, innovation, creativity, all those types of great things that you think should be unleashed if you take the routine, mundane, automated stuff out. On the downside, yes, job displacement and widening inequality is I think a real concern. And beyond that, I think there's a huge number of ethical challenges around bias, privacy, transparency of decision making. Especially in the workplace, it's not always clear to me as a technologist that people using these tools actually understand what and how they've been built and what the parameters of use around them can be. So it's kind of, sup lightly with the devil with a long-handed spoon, I think needs to be the approach sometimes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gillian. Yes, so really good points there by all of you. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those and discuss them in a bit more detail. So, Kayleigh, just to kind of kick things off in a bit more detail. In a corporate setting, do you think AI is a valuable tool, a potential threat, or perhaps a bit of both?
I think it's a valuable tool, absolutely valuable tool, if used correctly. There's always this debate around automation and augmentation, and I think companies, or the future of work for large organizations, requires both. Automation saves time, as Gillian said, for manual tasks, for the admin burden, perfect use case. And then there's augmentation where it creates value. And that's just as if not more important to corporates, because I believe, there was that pivotal moment where corporate functions like procurement, HR, legal are under a lot of pressure to do more with less, deliver strategic value, and not just be the admin gatekeeper or transact processes. And at the same time, business users want autonomy. They want to face less blockers from these processes and these gatekeepers from these corporate functions. And I think that's where augmentation and the right use of AI is really, really useful, and is, I think the next wave of productivity.
And Gillian, Lana, do you agree with that, or would you challenge it in any way?
It's definitely an opportunity. I mean, I am a big fan of automation and optimization, but its question need to be asked, about people. What do you do with people? Do you retrain them or do you displace them? And for me, it's very short-sighted if company decides to displace the person instead of retraining them for doing something else. And I have a good example of IKEA. I think they retrained, don't remember exact number, but more than 1,500 people to be designers instead of just doing jobs they were doing before. So they didn't displace people. and their profit were up dramatically the next year. So they're a very good example of how skill set can be utilized to bring value to the company when they reduce manual work task.
Yeah, I tend to agree that it's a positive thing. But it's not just about replacing tasks. It goes back to what Kayleigh referenced in the original set. A lot of the benefit from it, I think, is going to be driven not by just automating the existing processes, so we, as she, paraphrase, do red tape faster. It's got to be about redefining how work gets done. And I think that's the bigger challenge, whether it's a societal challenge, whether it's a corporate challenge, whether it's a policy challenge. I think AI, especially when you get beyond generative AI into some of the agent AI and agentic AI, there's real potential for disconnect there.
It's interesting, isn't it? And you do have these ethical questions that many people are worried about around AI and kind of, is it going to replace everybody? If it does, what are humans going to do? But actually, where I've seen AI used the best, and certainly in the context of what I do, it can actually upskill and enable people to upskill and do more interesting tasks. So if you think about a large corporate M&A transaction where there might be hundreds of thousands of documents, and even if you've got the biggest deal team at the biggest law firm, they're not going to be able to read all of those documents. It's going to take far too long. But by utilizing AI and scanning those documents through the AI, by teaching it well and making sure that it picks up on the things that you want it to, then actually humans can then focus in on the things that are much more interesting, that are less boring, and enable them to kind of upskill. But it does need that human oversight, because if you don't have it and it makes a mistake, then it'll keep making the same mistakes over and over again, which is not good for anyone, and certainly not good for the transaction. And then I've seen various other research as well that kind of suggests that AI kind of left unchecked over time, if it's essentially allowed to just train itself, then the quality of the data actually gets worse over time without having that human oversight. So used in the best way, I don't think it will replace humans, but it should enable them to do more interesting things over time.
And may I just add to it, you actually mentioned a good point where AI will displace people. People will displace people by using AI. AI is just a tool like everything else, and how people use it. Actually, if they're bad actors, we have security, biological risk. If corporation decides that quick profits are, needed, then it's people who will use AI to actually not in the right way. So it's not AI, it's how we all behave with AI will make our future. This is why we just need to take accountability.
Absolutely. And Gillian, do you think there's perhaps a danger then in corporate entities pressuring businesses and kind of business units to adopt AI when they don't really fully understand its capabilities?
Well, yes, because, I've been working with AI in one form or another in this field for 30 years. But since OpenAI and DeepSeek and those generative AI large language models have come on the scene, everybody knows what AI is now, supposedly. And everybody thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread and it's going to solve world hunger along the way. And I think, it's really about the application of knowledge to solve different processes, because, people have a tendency, I think, to attribute human motives and emotions and characteristics and behaviors to AI, certainly when they interact with things like ChatGPT, but it doesn't possess any feelings, it doesn't have consciousness, and it's a fantastic tool, but it's not human. And that's where it comes down to at the end of the day, is people who have a comprehension of what they're doing or have a target or have an outcome that they're trying to achieve can use it to chew through huge amounts of data and come to pattern recognition or other sorts of elements very fast. But if you don't know what you're doing with it, it's going to become a huge time sink. You're not going to get any output that makes any sense. And it's going to become another industry of consultants that you call in, because certainly in large corporate, the best way to de-risk yourself in your job is to have experts from outside come in and give an opinion and then be able to point at them to say, well, that's what they told us to do, that's what we did. So that's kind of the more interesting side of it. Yes, I think there'll be a lot of pressure for people to use it. I think there'll be a lot in the next 3 to 5 years, people using it in inappropriate ways with inappropriate outcomes and damaging outcomes. And I guess that's probably where we are today. I mean, we've all seen the example, of people that have used it and done things. The chatbot that's run amok and starts telling the customer that's, trying to get a response from it, something very rude to do with themselves. And that sort of unconstrained, not supervised approach isn't particularly helpful to brand, to people's process, or to productivity within a company. So that's kind of where I am with it, I think, at this point.
And Lana, who do you think should ultimately be accountable for an AI's impact? And do you think there's a danger in it being seen by some as a replacement for human creativity?
I was thinking a lot about replacement of human creativity, and I don't think it will happen because we invented cameras to take photographs, and yet we still love paintings. So there is, diversions, it will be suited for everybody. I think it's the beginning. We will have a hype about AI-produced content, but then it will level down, and some people will carry on with AI, and some people will come back to old-fashioned movies, paintings, and so on. So based on the history, I don't think it will overtake creativity. I think humans possess some sort of energy that's very unlikely will be copied by AI. But there are a lot of dangers with it. We need to be realistic. We can't be over optimistic about it. We need to know dangers of AI. And we need to understand that if AI doesn't behave, or Gen AI doesn't give us output we expect, we need to review our prompts and how we communicate. So from my point, I was actually excited because I think that prompting will improve human communication when we ask somebody to complete a task. Very often we assume people know what we mean, but AI doesn't take assumption. If you give incorrect instruction, it will give you wrong output. And as long as you realize that output provided it because of your instruction, you can review it, and then you learn to be more accurate in your direction. This will help you with your kids, husband, wives, and workforce. So yeah, we just need to be realistic and aware, self-aware.
Right, and do you, what kind of pushback do you get from clients in this respect?
First reaction is, I know Gen AI, it's stupid. And then I ask to review backlog of communication, and straight away I have good examples to work with. Okay, replying to AI, oh, this is wrong answer, doesn't do anything to the machine. You need to explain what was wrong, or I don't like it. Again, it's an emotion that cannot be translated by the machine. So we go through the stages of learning how Gen AI actually works and how it predicts things. So everybody needs to understand the structure behind, and I don't think it's optional anymore. I think it needs to be studied at school. Kids need to realize that not all answers are actually correct answers. So when they do homework using ChatGPT, it doesn't guarantee that they will have top marks. And that, large language models are not one point of truth, where before you could have Google results and you choose what suits you better, what seems like a correct result, where now there is default trust in the output that whatever ChatGPT said must be true, which is not the case. And this is the reason why I think that, companies need to keep experts in their domain, because nobody else will know if output is correct or not. Because if you, for example, design an application that to do with legal requirements, it needs to be evaluated by a legal team. You cannot just read through and, okay, it looks okay, because obviously consequences can be dramatic.
Interesting. Funny enough, I was chatting to somebody the other day, and they were telling me a story about some AI plagiarism checking software, which is flagged, and kind of one of their children and said, oh, that they've clearly used AI in relation to this essay, and for very very particular reasons, this person I was speaking to, they knew that it hadn't been written by AI because they'd actually helped their child write it themselves. So it was interesting that the software got it completely wrong. And that raises some interesting questions as well about how you police that, and particularly with students at university and kind of other students at school. If institutions are going to be using this kind of software, how they make sure it's right and don't unfairly punish people without proof, 100% proof that they have actually done something wrong.
To be frank, I think it's a wrong approach to start with a punishment instead of looking at our current education system, because it's very outdated. And AI can actually good reason to review old approaches, do they work, even how much time spent. Maybe it's need to be more verbal communication, and not to give homework that can be just done by AI, but AI should be used for research and to help to build debates and, their arguments. So I think reviewing education will be a more productive approach instead of just putting blockers on using AI.
Actually, I have a slightly different spin on this, because one of the things that I've observed, and I suppose it's come through, multiple cycles of different technologies. So, there's a lot being written now about the harm of social media and what it's done to mental health for young people. But you can extend that further to conversations that are going on in the educational and in the corporate space around how humans can't focus, can't think long scale, because they've got so used to short snacking content that they can only absorb certain amounts of it. And I think the bigger question for me about AI is, if we allow it to take on a lot of these tasks and be the gatekeepers of knowledge, are we basically just dumbing down humans in that they don't have to do the research, they don't have to learn about things? And whereas, 15, 10, 5 years ago, we would have looked to particular experts or knowledge bases internally in the company, that now we're going to say, well, AI does that. 5 years from now, there isn't going to be anybody in the company who actually understands how their company works. That's certainly a path of progression that I can see.
Yeah, there could be a real danger of kind of perhaps diminishing the pool of that human expertise in that we need longer term. It'll be interesting to see how we kind of limit the risk of that. Kayleigh, obviously, as an AI founder, what sort of pushback are you getting back from your clients? How are they thinking?
Could classify them into two buckets: the AI enthusiasts that want everything AI, not to say that they understand it all, but they want everything AI. And then the second bucket, that is those that are scared of AI because they think any data they put in there, especially when you talk about material contracts, goes into the public, and therefore they're scared of AI. But regardless of which bucket they fall into, I think that the truth is, and Lana, you mentioned this, AI is no longer, it's a commodity. It's no longer a competitive edge. It's not new. It's not novel. It's the new baseline. And even those that are scared of AI may not have implemented it in their processes. I ask those clients and say, but does your staff not use it? Do they not use their personal ChatGPT accounts to write job descriptions and emails and summarize documents? Because they do. So therefore, you are using it. And therefore, it's so much more important, and it matters so much that to look at how corporates implement AI into their business processes to actually create value, because you can't stop it. It's because it's happening anyways, and therefore you need to control how it's happened. And that means it's all about structural integration, because it's one thing to use AI to write a LinkedIn post, but it's a completely different thing to use it to make £1 million procurement decision. And that's where, this structural integration is really, really important. And that's what we tell those that are more on the scared side, because it is inevitable. And the other argument for that is that if you use a generic LLM, outside of the obviously limitations that we already talked about, they don't know your business, these models. They don't. And therefore, you need to feed it data and feed it information, or work with the right vendors that can help you embed your policies and embed your workflows and embed your millions of data points that you have to make better decisions. Because there's a real risk in just automating chaos and just slapping a model or AI onto a broken process. Nobody wants to automate chaos. We want to create value. And that headline around integration is incredibly important, and that's what we tell these clients.
Absolutely, and I guess as we know, lots of staff within businesses, they're using things like ChatGPT on a daily basis, but I'm not sure how many of them realise that actually, if they're putting things into ChatGPT, and that's the publicly available version, and they're putting confidential information in there, well, that's there forever. Whereas actually, if you're using a version that's kind of in a closed environment, and that information isn't released into the general public ether, it's a much safer way to do it. And again, some of the best AIs that I've seen do exactly that, and kind of work within that closed environment, are actually pulling on information that the company already has, precedents that they already have, legal knowledge that it already has, and kind of generating much better outcomes. So I wonder just kind of what each of you think about the best way for kind of business to manage the potential risks of AI, such as those inbuilt biases and potential reputational damage in the event of high-profile failure. What should companies be doing to manage that risk?
I guess therein lies the rub in some ways. I look at this from a slightly different perspective now, because obviously as an angel and looking for investment opportunities, I'm looking at this problem in terms of where would we go to find solutions for that, and what would be investable. So, OpenAI, DeepSeek, those large language models that exist today, I don't think anybody should be trying to invest in yet another mousetrap in there. Just think about the billions of dollars or pounds that are going to be spent with someone else trying to, train another model on all the information in the world and then update it on a 6-monthly basis. So I don't think that's really where corporations should be focusing. But I do think that Kayleigh talked about it already in terms of some of the taking some of the models like that and using them in a context where you are effectively machine learning or deep learning, which I think is probably more appropriate for the corporate environment versus the straight generative AI type tool, in that you can set up those reinforcement learning, as it's called. You can teach the model to find the best results versus via trial and error. You can reward it for making corrections. You can have the algorithms improved. You can also do a variety of things around, setting up policies for zero data retention, prompts and outputs that never store in the model. You need to establish a series of security controls and agreements, particularly with external AI partners, if that's what you're doing. But I think actually the future of where it's probably going more in the corporate side is around the use of agents of some form or another. So that's the use of machine learning or natural language processing being used with some sort of builder to create a software program effectively that handles a variety of tasks. And those can be self-learning and they can be set for improvement. So you get perceptions and data collection coverage, you can get decision making, you can get action and execution, and you get learning and adaptation. And most importantly, from a corporate business perspective, because it's not a human, it's 24/7, it's consistent, it's scalable, and it can enhance efficiency. So those types of things where you start to get into more advanced and independent supervised wider ranges of tasks are probably the best way to go. But when you start trying to handle bias, then really what you're looking for is multiple inputs and a really clear set of data structures and reliabilities being built around it. And it's not that bias or any of these things are particularly unique to what's happening with AI. We only have to look at the whole, medical approval system to understand that if you want to approve a medicine that's good for a white man, you have a huge data set that's very easy to work on to get it approved. If you want to work on it for a female, or you want to work on it for, a Hispanic or an African population, that's a much bigger task because the rules that were set in place basically for white men. And everybody kind of recognizes that now, but it's taking a huge amount of effort to overcome it, the results of it. So I think being aware of input bias, being aware of these types of issues and working at the front to deal with them versus just trying to fix the results later on is interesting. But I think that some of this is going to have to become policy and procedures. As people use these tools in a workplace and they use them in inappropriate ways, I think there has to be employment law and there has to be other things that deal with it. I mean, there are a number of specific regulations that are already in place. Let's call it the EU AI Act. Even in the States, there's some of the regulation coming in that's sectorial or evolving around regulation. There's also labor laws. And when you start bringing things like hardware elements of AI in terms of robotics, then you get into health and safety agencies. So there's a whole framework that AI is going to have to work within. Just because we're taking humans out of the loop, we're not taking the regulatory and we're not taking the bias, we're not taking anything out. So I guess that's where I come at it from, investment opportunities and things that corporates have to deal with. It's a big remit, basically.
Thanks, Gillian. Any more thoughts on that, Kayleigh, Lana?
I think people who want to invest in AI need to break down AI into three categories, at least on Gen AI. First, it's large language model. We're talking about OpenAI, Anthropic's, DeepSeek, and basically, first level design. Then we will have companies that will create firewalls, specialized AI, legal AI, or medical, experts. And we will have a third layer, and this will be apps that are based on one of these, specialist AI. And from my perspective, I think, we will have a correction market because everybody is very optimistic and a lot of money invested. So people do need to be careful and remember .com, boom. But I think every time you invest in AI companies, you need to ask yourself question, will company keep the data? Do they do anything else? For example, like Microsoft, they're not just AI, they do different, verticals. And will they be able to pivot if crash does happen? So if you approach investment with questions like this, then you reduce the risk. Not remove it, but you will reduce it.
And Kayleigh, presumably you faced some issues when talking to investors about their approach to AI. Did investors get it?
I think so. We have very specific use cases for how we use AI that also help with obviously talking to investors, but also with the adoption at large corporates, because some of these corporates, they don't move as fast on these innovations as you may think they do, and therefore we have to have a more of a conservative and very explanatory approach to it and how we embed it. And to give a very simple use case, what the system does, or one of the use cases, is that it creates contracts based on templates and clauses of our clients. And if you look at the old process, you have these long Word documents and they have lots of free text boxes. And a free text box that says, what's the scope? What's the context of this? What are you trying to achieve? What's the background? And you can't just ask these questions to AI and say, without any context, tell me the background of my project. That doesn't work. So that's we need to flip this on its head and say, okay, it augments human judgment. You're the human, you know what you want to do with your project, you know what the background is, but you may not be very good at writing legal wording. Therefore, write it in bullet points, write it in plain English, and AI will help you convert your context that you've written, your knowledge, into something that is a legal clause, or it converts it into something that uses very clear language and no jargon. It converts it into something that's much less risky language because it's a contract. So these use cases, I never get any pushback from, because it's a very clear, helpful thing that at the end of the day reduces risk and is very welcomed by really anyone involved there, whether it's legal who has the end product or it's the business user that has to write it, because that's what AI should be doing at the end of the day. And I think from that adoption point of view, the best way to reduce risk is to use AI to augment human judgment rather than replace it, because that doesn't work.
Brilliant, thank you. So, conscious of time, so we're going to have a look at a few questions which have been coming in from the audience, and the first one is a question from Jenny. Just how is AI affecting both founders' fundraising and investors' decision making and investing?
So I'll have a go at this from an investor perspective. I don't think it's coincidental that we're kind of still in a hype cycle. So I can't remember the last time I saw a pitch. Pretty much in the last 6 months that didn't start with whatever it is we're doing, and we're using AI to do it. And when you try to ask them, well, what are you actually doing with AI? Like, is it a generative AI model? Is it neural networking? Is it deep learning? Have you got agents in there? It's amazing the number of times there is absolutely no response to those questions. It's sort of like, because I've got a computer program in there doing something, I've decided to call it AI. So that's the first thing, is that there's a massive amount of hype. That's a real turnoff. For some of the areas where the companies are genuinely doing things with some level of artificial intelligence, I kind of look at it through a lens of, does it break the laws of physics in terms of the aspirations? What does it mean in terms of the amount of sheer processing power they're going to need, compute power to do something? Do I think that's viable for whatever money they're raising? I tend to look for things that are quite focused around what they're trying to do. They're not trying to boil the ocean. They're trying to solve a specific problem, be it, developing a co-worker that's artificial intelligence or it's task specific or a self-operating agent. It's some sort of workflow embedding type thing. So I think there are massive opportunities. And I think one of the things that as an investor, I think we'll see is a lot of companies with very, very small workforces who are able to do huge things in relatively short spaces of time. So I think we'll see the end point to money and returns being possibly accelerated. And that's got some implications for how people invest and what people are going to invest in. Because I personally like to invest in things that have a longer timeline or are doing more foundational problem solving. So I guess from an investment perspective, I see that AI is just a word that's hype. 90% of it, people actually have no understanding of what it means in terms of what they put up on their pitch deck. And for the ones that are doing it, look for targeted and specific use cases and problems that we're trying to solve rather than boiling the ocean.
And I think it brings a valid point from Gillian as well, that investors need to educate themselves on what AI is. Because if you do not understand what AI is, then there is a big risk that somebody will sell you a great idea that's good on the paper, solves a problem, but is it not priced correctly because they do not realize how much processing power is needed, or a wrong technology is used to actually to approach a problem in the first place. So if founders do not understand what the AI does and investors do not understand what the AI does, the risk of failure is quite high.
Thanks, Lana. And I suppose just a question for me in relation to that. From an investor perspective, are there some kind of big red flags that you're looking out for in AI startup pitches right now? Bearing in mind that the potential fines for if things aren't done as they should be under the EU AI Act. I mean, for the most serious breaches, up to 35 million euros or 7% of global revenue, whichever's higher. Are you looking out for those kind of flags when deciding whether to invest?
Yes, I mean, not regulations yet, because I do not think that laws are clear enough, and what is defined as AI fault, we will not know until one big case that will happen, then it will be more clear. My red flags are more about, what problem people are solving, because they can come up with a wonderful pitch deck and think they're solving the problem, but when you start asking about data and quantitative output of success, then it all falls apart, because they say we had a wonderful pivot study. Okay, but what was the output? How do you know it's successful? And majority of the time we do not have these answers, to say, okay, yeah, it actually does prove the idea does work. So it's clarity and understanding of the problem that, founders do try to solve.
Brilliant, thank you. And then we've got another question from somebody who's been listening in, Simon. What's the panel's view on what data can be shared and definitely not shared on foundational AI models such as Claude and ChatGPT?
Cool. Go on, Gillian. You will take more strict point of view. I will be more flexible with personal data.
I think it's more about the context it's being done in. So if I take a case where you are employed to do a job, I think it's what Kayleigh referenced in some ways. You need to be really careful about what you are sharing about intellectual property, confidential information, company-specific details, contractual details on an open AI model in a public domain. And I think that's probably the biggest single risk is people have got used to bringing their devices to work. They've got used to working from home. They've got used to using tools that are not behind a corporate firewall. And I would say, if I'm going back to Simon's question, I think all of those things in a corporate context should not be shared on OpenAI or Claude or GPT or DeepSeek or anything else. Because once you put them out there, the classic example, someone's got a contract, they're looking for a competitive advantage against somebody else. They load the contract into Claude, for example, tell it to go find better examples of it without realizing they've just put that information in public domain and it's no longer confidential. And it may be a document that is supposed to be confidential between them and another party. So I think the rule really is if you're in the workplace, you shouldn't really be using public versions of OpenAI or Microsoft Copilot or any of those things to load and ask questions of company information. That's where I would draw the line. On the personal side, what you do at home with your own personal information, that's your choice. I personally don't like to share a lot of that stuff online, but for those that do, that's fine. It's their choice as long as they understand that once they put it in there, it's in there forever, and the models have it, and it will disseminate where it disseminates.
May I just add, sorry, but I would like to add that there are settings where you can tell the model not to use your data for training. So you do need to go in and change these settings. You have it in Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, I think they are not using your data by default, but it's in paid version. I think in unpaid version.
Only the paid one.
Yeah, you don't have this luxury. So there is an option, but you need to pay for privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there probably is a little bit of kind of common sense that's needed as well. And if you're using things like ChatGPT and Claude in the workplace, and it's not a private version, well, that is okay as long as you're not putting anything that's confidential in there. So just apply a bit of common sense, and just if it's something which a reasonable person would think is confidential, then you probably shouldn't be putting it in there.
What do we think is the percentage of the workforce in a corporate that uses these public models with confidential data of the corporate? Because I think it's
I think it's very high. If I just take anecdotal information from folks that I know that are tech adopters, I wouldn't be surprised if it's about 75%.
But it's down to education again. I think people do not realize that, whatever they do has consequences. And, if adoption, happens in the workplace, so they are allowed to use LLMs that are provided by the enterprises, and it's safer, so they don't need to use their own personal versions. And, knows that if they pay for their version, data will be more protected. I do not believe it will be 100% protected, but at least you have some level of protection. So it's down to education by the companies.
And it's also an opportunity to ask yourself something, in the same way that you get a bunch of apps for free, and people have grown. At least I think most people now at this point understand that they're giving their data away, so it's not actually free. You need to start asking the same question. If you're not paying a subscription for these types of models, what are you giving away for free? Because you are giving something away to get it for free.
Absolutely. Look, it's been fascinating, and as I knew it would be, but I'm very conscious of time. I think we're very nearly at the hour. Thank you to all of you for being on the panel and for engaging with all of the questions that have been firing at you. Simon, have you got any final remarks you'd like to make just about upcoming events?
I have indeed, and I'm just about to share my screen with you. So, but before I do that, I just want to say thank you so much to a great panel. I knew that we'd get to 6 o'clock and still have loads of areas that we needed to explore after our introductory chat last week. So that was brilliant. So thanks to Lana, Gillian, Kayleigh, and Chris. Great discussion.